you can't really go out there and say like, I'm gonna sell the company. Companies are being bought; they're not being really sold. So the premise, of course, is there are companies out there who are looking for a startup to buy. Usually, you don't really convince someone to buy your company. Like they're usually looking for something, and then you happen to meet, basically. So what you need to do is you can't really companies are being bought and not sold, but at the same time, of course, you need to make yourself visible to the potential buyers. So that's sort of the story there. So one thing when it comes to these corporate venture capital people is they are not so much out there in the startup environment in general. Like you get to see and get to know VCs fairly easily, I would say, or relatively easily when you're working in startup environment, because they, show up at events and exchange business cards and that kind of stuff. So they're very close to the startup environment. But CVC people are, let's say, they wear usually ties. Let's put it that way. They don't usually show up in these events, and let's say they're not necessarily the coolest guys, for example. I hope that you can cut that out. No, it's fine. It's fine. But anyways, it's just a different vibe. It's a different vibe.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
So what you usually do is, if you are sort of considering that step as well. Or even if you're just doing fundraising, via VCs, that's still applicable. Is you kind of find a company that does a financial advisory service. There are companies like a lot of them, Deloitte, KPMG, that kind of stuff. They usually have a section that help companies find the people who want to invest in the company, and they have a huge list of all the sort of big corporations that have a sort of investment unit in them, and they usually have some connection with these. And having someone sort of in between helps you to basically they can sort of vet the whole list of potential investors while still keeping your company name anonymous, for example. So together with these companies, you can sort of work on a pitch deck, and then they send it out on your behalf, but from their email account, basically. So nobody knows what is happening. That's good. If you want to keep a certain kind of, distance, right. You don't want to make everything public right away. So having someone in between helps. So it's it's very good to, unless you already know a lot of VCs, for example, it's very good to contact some of those M&A advisory companies and say, can you help us out? And the way the deal usually works is they take a certain percentage cut of whatever the deal size is.
Cool.
And it's very important and they basically act like a project manager for that fundraising or that M&A, for example. And that's very important because you are doing your own job, which is usually busy enough, right? And the very fact that you're doing fundraising means that you kind of see the end of your cash, right? So you also getting a bit nervous and stuff. And when you do that kind of deal, there's a lot of technical details, and sort of you have to answer a lot of questions, and they do a lot of, the buyer side will ask a lot of due diligence questions, and sometimes you need a translator to understand what is this asking. Like there's some certain terms you're like, unless you're really in finance industry, like you're like, I don't know. And of course there's an answer, but somehow you need someone to translate what that actually means. And there's also like a lot of paperwork and sort of technical steps, and basically it's good to have this sort of secretary project manager for that thing, so that they sort of, they keep the pace and say, hey, we need to answer this email. Because a lot of emails coming in, so it's good to have sort of a pacemaker and someone who has the expertise for making these deals kind of happen. So it's good to interview a lot of these companies and pick the one that you like best. Also in terms of what their cut rate is, in terms of depending on the deal size. Of course, they don't do all the kinds of deals. Like for every deal size, there's a different kind of player. Let's say. So you need to sort of get familiar with some of those companies, interview like 5, 6, 7 of them, and then sort of figure out which one works for you. And of course, you have to work with them very closely over, these deals can take like 6 months or longer, right? So it's also important, like whether you have good chemistry with them, like can you communicate with them really quickly, and do they get you, and that kind of stuff. So